Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 505 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. And on today's show, we are discussing the conscious exit of the rat race. Now, let's back up and let's talk about a 2023 survey conducted by the American Psychological Association. This survey found that 41% of parents here in America said that, quote, most days they are so stressed they cannot function. That's 41% of American parents. 48% said that most days their stress is completely overwhelming. And 50% said that when they are stressed, they can't bring themselves to do anything. I have heard modern life called a hamster wheel. I've heard it called a rat race. Those of us who were raised in a westernized culture were taught at a very young age to live on someone else's terms and adhere to someone else's agenda. We followed the script. We did what we were taught, what we were supposed to do. But half of American adults are drowning in stress every single day. Something's not right. But there is an alternate way, and it is to slow down. For real this time, really slow down. Not just talk about it, think about it, say, oh, that would be nice, but actually slow down. My guest today is Stephanie O'Day. She is a New York Times bestselling author. She's also the author of the new book titled Slow Living: Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World. That book is out now. Now, before we get into the interview, quick note. This show is listener supported, which means I need your support. An episode came out only for subscribers last Thursday. Did you miss it? Maybe you did. It was all about digital minimalism with a cute little twist. So if you want to listen to that and other subscriber-only episodes, you can do so on Apple Podcasts. Just hit the subscribe now button. Try the free trial if you like it. I do hope you consider staying on as a paid subscriber because, again, this show needs you to stay in business. Hey, by the way, did you notice, if any of you listen to my favorite podcast, This American Life, they are also switching over to a subscriber model. And that's because the podcast ad space is tanking and taking fast. So unless all of you listeners rise up and support your favorite shows, what I see happening is a lot of shows folding. The good news is that if you love this show and if it adds value to your life, you can support it with $5 a month, $45 a year, and that will quite literally keep the lights on, keep the content coming. So thank you for considering. Stephanie, I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. Another Stephanie, best name ever. Really excited to talk to you. How are you?
I am great, and you're absolutely correct. I always get excited when I see my own name in my inbox.
It's the best name, let's be honest. Well, you have a new book out now. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about slow living. But before we do that, let's talk about you. Let's talk about crockpots. Let's talk about how you found yourself living slow. Tell us about yourself.
I love it. Yes. First off, I'm so grateful that you invited me on. So thank you. We have so much overlap in the way our brains work and how we're raising our families. And so I'm overjoyed to spend this time with you. I live in Silicon Valley, so the San Francisco Bay Area, which is insanely fast-paced. So the idea that I write, coach, teach, and speak about slow living sounds like an oxymoron, but our family just decided on purpose. We didn't want to get caught up with the Joneses. We didn't want to do things that other people thought or expected us to do. So when they zigged, we zag. And my whole thought process is literally like the metaphor of the pressure cooker and the crock pot. And just because you can do something fast, it doesn't mean you necessarily should. So I actually got my start writing online in 2008. And that's because I made a New Year's resolution to use my crockpot slow cooker every day for a year and write about it. And it went viral. It took off. It was a great time to start a food blog. There were very few. This actually was the first crockpot slow cooker blog. So I liked the idea of this kind of tightly focused recipe site, but I am not necessarily a great cook. I liked the idea of the crock pot where I could put it all in the morning, push a button, and walk away and never have to think about it again. I'm a little prone to anxiety. I definitely get overwhelmed with decision fatigue. So the idea that I could get dinner going during breakfast time was like a literal godsend to me. And so that's how a year of slow cooking blog took off. I ended up on national television. The first book came out, and I was lucky enough that it spent 6 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list. I legit loved every bitty bit of all of it, and I could write in my slippers from the kitchen table while my kids were little.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple things there that I want to touch on. It sounds like the blog enabled you to live a precious gift, which is time with your children. It sounds like it was flexible and you got to center yourself around your children when they were small. However, it also sounds like your life was quite busy, going on shows, having a New York Times best-selling book. How did you continue to live slow during such a busy season of life?
While the book was taking off and the publicity was happening, it didn't feel fast. I was very choosy and picky. And one thing that really opened my eyes happened during a snowstorm in Manhattan. The Rachel Ray show flew me out, and it was lovely and wonderful, and I enjoyed it. But then JFK got shut down because of a blizzard, and I was stuck in an absolutely lovely Manhattan hotel room, and I couldn't get home. And my youngest at the time was in kindergarten, and it was President's Day weekend going into Valentine's Day. I wanted to help her fill out the Valentine's Day cards. I wanted to help like stick the lollipops on, and I couldn't. My husband could. He's a great guy. So he held down the fort, but I was actually just having a panic attack and rocking myself in this Manhattan just gorgeous hotel room thinking, this is not what I want. I don't want to do this. I started all of this because I wanted to be home with my babies. So that really was an eye opener. And right around then, I did a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, and I had this kind of voice of God just telling me, like, just because you can do something fast, it doesn't mean that you should. So I unplugged from writing for maybe about 18 months. And then I decided I really wanted to use that metaphor and apply it to all aspects of my life, not just in the kitchen. And we really have formed our life around that concept. So before we say yes to a calendar invite or even a play date or a holiday gathering, we ask if it's something we really want to do, or are we just doing it out of guilt or a sense of obligation?
You mentioned something there in your response. You said essentially slow living for you is, at least in part, deciding on purpose how you spend your days, because how you spend your days is how you spend your life, right? Deciding on purpose. Yet in your book, you make the point that all of us in the Western world have been trained, essentially. We've been trained by our parents. We've been trained by teachers and bosses to act a certain way, pursue certain things, adhere to some unnamed but ever-present agenda, perhaps. Can you speak more on this? Because if we've been trained to act and live one way, how can we stop and decide on purpose whether the agenda is how we want to spend our days?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. It's funny. In the book, I use the metaphor of us being glorified trained SEALs, that we're trying to win the gold stars, the A's, the pats on the back from our boss. And that's fine to a certain extent. You have to get your way through school. You have to do some of these things in order to, quote unquote, play the game of life. But in real life, what most people really, truly want deep down inside are very basic human needs: connection, a feeling of warmth, a feeling of pride, a sense of peace. I'm a huge fan of acronyms, and throughout the book, I pepper it full of acronyms. So the acronym I use for slow is to simply look only within. So before you buy this or that new thing or decide you want this or that kind of like arbitrary goal, I do want you to slow down. I do want you to stop and take a pause and go within and ask yourself an open-ended question. Why do I even want this? And is this thing, this item, this goal, this achievement, will this truly make me happy? And I think a lot of times people are doing things again out of guilt or obligation, or because they think it's a marker of success and someone else will be impressed by it.
Yes, you say marker of success there, and I'm going to come back to that. I'm writing it down, and I want to come back to markers of success. But let's talk about capitalism for a minute, because the buying stuff on the hamster wheel, overworking so we have enough money to buy all the markers of success, all the status symbols, let's say, that seems to correlate highly with fast living, right? We're working so hard, again, to make the money. And if we're working so hard and we're always busy and always saying yes to all the things, there's less, if any, time to stop and say, wait a minute, is this fast living working for me? Is this how I want to spend my life? So what is the connection, in your opinion, between fast living, always on the go, and capitalism? Is fast living keeping the wheels of capitalism churning?
Yeah, probably. It's interesting. It's a lot easier to sell things to people who are unhappy or uncomfortable or in pain. And if you just take the time to actually chronicle and watch commercials in real time, if you're watching like cable news or something like that, or listen to the commercials on talk radio, there's a lot of drug commercials. There's a lot of alleviating pain and symptoms, but not really going deep down to the cause of what the uncomfortableness is. And so it's definitely a bit like drugs. So if you're not able to sit and process hard emotions, you may think you'll feel better by pushing that Amazon buy now button. And you might, in the moment, get a bit of a dopamine rush, but later you're going to end up feeling empty again. And so the work is to sit with those feelings and process them. And if you're raising children, this is what you want to model to them. If they're having a hard day, do we really want to teach them that happiness is on the other side of retail therapy versus just sitting and thoughtful, maybe talking their feelings out, their thought processes out? We're having a huge pendulum shift towards mental health awareness and putting children in counseling and talk therapy. And all of that is fantastic. But if you're not living that as their number one role model, that's something to really pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, the distraction piece, because I'm thinking about myself personally. When I'm living slow, when my life is at a slow pace, there's more opportunity for me in my daily life to sit with negative emotions, let's say, and really feel them. And negative emotions don't feel good. Like, my natural propensity is to escape sitting with negative emotions, even though I know that the only way out is through. I know that, but sitting with rage, sitting with deep sadness, like that doesn't feel good. And so I don't think I'm alone in wanting to outrun these feelings through perhaps shopping or overeating or over drinking or some sort of instant gratification to distract myself. What would you say to listeners like me who, when they live slow, they're faced with some deep-seated negative emotions inside them and they don't like the way that feels? What would you say to them?
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. We are living in a very fast-paced environment, and acknowledging that and deciding to do something a little bit different is terribly uncomfortable. And it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought up kind of the distraction and the numbing out. It's much easier to numb out negative emotions by turning to binge eating or binge drinking or doom scrolling or over things. And none of that is bad when you're deciding on purpose to do it. The problem is when it turns into a default coping mechanism. And it's like what we touched on earlier, that it is a bit of a drug effect. It's treating a symptom instead of the root cause. And I'm glad you brought up drinking, because it's interesting. A lot of my one-on-one coaching clients, many of them decide after a while to give up drinking or give up things because they're now so comfortable with being uncomfortable, and they have so much collected evidence that they can get through difficult times without reaching for their quote unquote drug of choice. And when you start to listen to your own thoughts and not beat yourself up in your brain for having them, it may actually feel a little worse in the beginning before it gets better. But then one morning, you'll wake up and you'll have such extreme pride that you were able to get through the last breakup, the last deadline at work, the last stressful in-law visit, etc., without reaching for your drug of choice. And whether or not that's mindless scrolling or a bottle of wine or binge shopping, but vices are a problem. So when you feel like you need a fix of something because you can't function, that's definitely something to poke out. And not all vices are evil. So sometimes it's a matter of swapping out a negative vice with a positive one, such as a healthier obsession, running, yoga, reading. Pick up a novel and become entrenched in another world. But if your vice you're reaching for will put you on a path or a trajectory for worst health, either physical or mental, or make your finances out of whack if you keep on that trajectory, that's a red flag.
Mm. Does sitting with negative emotions get easier with time? I hope you're going to say yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's why people turn to prayer or turn to yoga or turn to meditating. Anyone who knows that there's quote unquote enlightenment on the other side becomes really evangelical in their speech because they have seen the light and they wish everyone else too can see the light. And you don't have to become nuts or crazy or zealot in this path, but it's so exciting when you have gone through a rough patch and gone through to the other side in a really healthy way. You really do want to help bring others along the path with you.
Sustainable Minimalist is supported by Wild, and Wild wants to shake up the throwaway culture of everyday bathroom products with refillable products that actually work. I am a huge fan of Wild deodorant. In fact, I'm such a fan, I'll be honest, I'll nerd out a little bit to deodorant. I have two. I keep one canister in my medicine cabinet, and I keep another one in my purse. This product is just that good. It has a clean formulation, which really matters to me. I don't want to be slathering aluminum or parabens in my underarms. It's also gentle on my sensitive skin thanks to shea butter and coconut oil. Go Wild today with 20% off your first order when you use code sustainable20 at checkout. Go to wearewild.com/US and use code sustainable20 at checkout for 20% off. Or you can simply click the link in the episode description. Enjoy. Well, Stephanie, I'd love to pivot and talk with you a little bit about success. We're given a script in this life, in this American culture that we live in which if we follow the script, if we do what we're supposed to do, success will come. And that's what we're told. I think a lot of us, when we reach adulthood and we followed the script and we're not rich and famous, perhaps, and like wildly successful, we then retroactively question the script. But the script is heavily based on fast living, right? Get the education, work your tail off in your 20s, climb the corporate ladder, all the things, all the fast living things. Is success possible? Is how we conventionally think of success possible if we're living slow?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. So when you're doing your own thing and doing what you know deep down inside is the right thing for you and your family, in the beginning, it might feel a little weird and you might have negative chatter like, is this even right? Is this going to work? So I'd like you to really think about what you want most out of life. Is it society's approval or is it a calm, healthy, peaceful family? So I like to use this formula for success, which is mindset plus action plus consistency equals success. So when you're in a good mood, and that's the mindset part, and getting in a good mood is different for all people. Maybe it's going out in nature. Maybe it's taking a nap and then waking up with a fresh brain. So when you're in a good mood, ask yourself, what do I want for my health? What do I want for my family? What do I want my future finances to be like? My future retirement? What kind of people do I want in my life? And I am all for dreaming big. If you want to make a vision board, go for it. I like to journal. I like to daydream. I love my brain. It's super fun in there. So I like to climb in all the time and kind of poke at it. But I'm not telling you to settle or to think what you have is good enough and you just have to be at peace with it. That's toxic positivity when you're just slapping a smile on your face going, it's fine, it's fine. If it's not fine, when you're in a good mood, ask yourself, how do I fix this? What is the next best step for me to take? And then just go quiet. Don't consume. You're not going to find this answer on TikTok. You're going to find this answer within. And then listen to what comes back because those are your action steps. That's what the next step of the mindset plus action plus consistency formula is do the things that your brain, your subconscious, the voice of God, the voice of the universe spoke back to you. And then just do them over and over and over again, which is consistency, and trust that if you do your part, you will get to where you want to go in a slow, steady, and sustainable way.
I like that. And I like how you mentioned that the answer is within us. Like the answer is not the script or the training that we've received from everybody, teachers, bosses, parents, etc. The answer is within us. However, life is really darn loud. And if we're not intentional about going inward daily, if we don't, at least for me, if I don't schedule it, I'm an external person by nature. I'm always living out. I think of it as living outside of my body. I have to actually schedule time to sit quietly, to go inward. And I know that not everybody is that way, but that's how it works for me. And if I don't schedule that time, it doesn't happen. Like I'm not meditating that day or I'm not checking in with myself that day because I have 2 kids. I have my job. I have my house to run. I have my ailing pets and my mom who just had surgery. Like I have a lot of things going on, as we all do. So what do you say to listeners who are thinking to themselves, yeah, Stephanie, yeah, Stephanie's, that all sounds great, but I can't find the time or hear the voice that's within because my life is too fast and my life is too noisy.
First off, I completely and totally agree with you. And I want to point out that scheduling meditation is the right way to do it. The fact is we only have a certain amount of time every day. That is just a fact. And you can be mad about it and you can have a temper tantrum and wish that you had more time. And if that's part of your process to have a little rage fit, do that and be annoyed and upset and work through those emotions and feelings and then decide on purpose how you're going to fix it. And scheduling it in is how to fix it. The most organized people, the most productive people, the people who do all of the things for all the people all the time and then still also have time for themselves, use their calendar and use their schedule. And sometimes people have this misguided notion that slow living means that they're kumbayaing all day and they're like Maria on the field and the sound of music yodeling. That might be a fun fantasy, but in real life, There are work deadlines to meet and kids to get to soccer practice on time and hungry people to feed and all of this stuff. So I know I have a background in education and you do too. And when you teach, you naturally time block throughout the day. And that's what I would ask for people to do, is to start time blocking. Time blocking could sound fancy, but it's really not, because we all grew up this way, because we all went through grade school and high school where the bell rings. And even if you didn't finish your math book, it doesn't matter because it's time for English. And that's how you move through your day. You will never meditate enough each day to get to enlightenment, but you could do 10 minutes every day and then trust you'll pick up tomorrow. The same way you're not going to get through your history book in 1 hour. It's okay. You do what you can in the time allotted, and then you move on to the next task with the idea that it's going to be okay. I'm just going to get there when I get there. And you're not behind. You're not trying to beat anyone. You're doing your own thing. So time blocking, huge proponent of, and just start writing down all of the things that you have to do and put a time allotment to them. You get to decide what's important to you. And that's the secret of slow living. It's legit to simply look only within.
Let's talk about that before we say goodbye, Stephanie. Simply look only within. I want to just look within and let my inner voice be my guide. However, we human beings, we Homo sapiens, we are species of comparison, right? And then we have technology and social media these days in which comparison with others has never been easier, right? We just log on and we see people living these seemingly perfect lives. You write in your new book that the more scrolling we do on social media, the more we will feel disenchanted with all the things, with our clothes, with our home, with our whatever, choose the thing. Where does tech-free living fall into this conversation? Where does stopping of the comparing fall in, and how do we do it in 2024? Because I've been living slow for many years now, and I would say 95% of the time it feels really great. It feels like I'm living aligned with my purpose, and I'm living according to that voice inside. However, the other 5% of the time, I'm looking all around me and seeing people doing big things, getting big things, rising the corporate ladder, getting big titles. And I do find myself 5% of the time wondering, wait a minute, am I falling behind?
Yeah. Yes, I do agree with you. And I too have had those uncomfortable feelings. When my kids were little, I knew from an intellectual standpoint, I've got a background in child development and psychology. I knew that for kids to feel grounded and attached, they needed to think or feel that they were my number one priority. So even though I was writing online, I wanted them to know that if they came into the room and they wanted to share an art project or something exciting with me, they had my full undivided attention. So I did try and streamline my days. So I was working on the computer when they were occupied. I didn't want to be that kind of mom with her head stuck in the phone all of the time. And that was a conscious decision. I often felt like I was doing it wrong. Many children in the neighborhood were going to Kumon after school. They were going to coding camp all summer. They were doing club sports and all of this stuff, whereas we were digging for worms in the backyard and watching clouds. And there were times where I felt less than as a mom because my kids were reading books in the dirt instead of spending their afternoons at coding camp. Now, if it helps, my kids are older. So I've got one in law school, she's 23, one in college, she's 20, and then I've got a freshman in high school. And they have come full circle and thanked me. And looking back on it now, I'm glad we made those choices. One, we saved a whole bunch of money. And two, we've got really great grounded kids who are now thankful for those hard decisions that we made in their early years.
I love that answer because it really is simple, right? Like if you don't want your children blindly following the pack, if we're trying to dissuade our children from just blindly doing what everybody else is doing, then we adults shouldn't either, right? I think that's what it comes down to. If I'm trying to teach my children to listen to your own inner compass, listen to that voice inside, then I need to take my own advice. And during that 5% of time when I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, am I living my life wrong? Let's go back to that inner voice because that's what I want to model for my children.
Yeah. And it's tricky, but it's also very gratifying to now see it happening in real time with my big kids. And when you're in the messy middle, OMG, it's hard. So please hug yourself and tell yourself, I think I'm doing the best I can at any given moment, because that messy middle is exhausting and it's absolutely hard work. So please don't dismiss any of the hard work part of it. Parenting is going to be hard no matter what. But what I want is for you to look back on it in your 50s, 60s, 70s and smile and be like, yeah, we made a lot of great memories here. It was really difficult to talk nonstop on that 5-hour flight instead of just plugging them into a device and headphones. I had to really pivot and drive conversation and really actively parent. But I'm so thankful because of that, I learned all of these things about my kids that I wouldn't have known if they were plugged in and doing their own thing. So please don't think it's going to be easy peasy pumpkin squeezy all the time. It's not. It's going to be hard work no matter what.
I like it. Stephanie, tell us about your new book. It's out now. It's titled Slow Living: Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World. Tell us where we can find it, where we can find you. Give us all the good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. The new book is available wherever books are sold. My website is stephanieodea.com. O'Dea is O-D-E-A. The podcast, if you're a podcast listener, is the Slow Living Podcast.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I wish you much success with your new book. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Listeners, that's it. Show notes at mamaminimalist.com/505. I have nothing else to say except see you Thursday and take care.